welcome to Crash Course Metal Volume 1 Early Heavy Metal, the most comprehensive beginner series on heavy metal guitar playing ever made. We are here at the world-famous Rainbow Bar and Grill, located on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, California. This place has been the heart of heavy metal since the early 1970s. If anything metal happens, it happens here on the Sunset Strip. My name's Joey.
And I'm Edward. The Crash Course Metal series is unlike any other beginning guitar series because you will learn how to play your guitar using the songs and styles that shaped early heavy metal. It is designed by metalheads for anybody who picks up the guitar with only one mission: to play heavy metal.
The topics we will cover will range from history, culture, guitar playing techniques, style, and the gear you will need to play heavy metal. This new concept of teaching is a first of its kind. Heavy metal is a style of hard rock music that incorporates thick, heavy guitars that are highly amplified and distorted. Beyond the sounds of metal, though, lies a subculture of society that spans the entire globe.
This usually comes in the form of black t-shirts, studs, leather, chains, long hair, and the basic rebellious attitude that goes against whatever is popular in society. Heavy metal is a state of mind. That's why we're all here.
Heavy metal has deep musical roots that can be traced back to the medieval times harmonically. The core of metal's sound lies within the harmonic interval known as the tritone. The medieval monks even went as far as to call this an unacceptable harmony because it was so oppressive, scary, and it had an evil sound. The tritone was extensively used by the likes of Beethoven and other composers of medieval times. Metal can be dated back to the 1500s with the tritone.
Your next stop will be the 1800s and slave music. By the time the 20th century had rolled around, we find the tritone dominating the blues. These elements combined with loud, distorted guitars, cannon-blasting drums, and a big fat bottom end from the bass equal heavy metal. The most blatant demonstration of the tritone was from the metal godfathers Black Sabbath.
I don't know about you, but I was bored in my hometown, and I really needed something to do. Heavy metal music turned me into a musician. My guitar and heavy metal music became a great outlet for me as a teenager and as an adult today. The electric guitar and the sonic power it projects through amplification is historically the key element in heavy metal, and what drew us toward the guitar and heavy metal.
Why do so many people identify with heavy metal? A lot of you might identify with heavy metal because it doesn't discriminate. It accepts everybody, and anything goes. Others may love metal because it allows you to stay in touch with your inner child. This die-hard loyalty is the bond that has united the fans of this music since the mid-60s and every generation to come.
Some people say that Hendrix was the first heavy metal guitar player. Others may say that Cream was the first heavy metal band. Do you know who Blue Cheer was? Maybe you've heard the song The Summertime Blues. Was Steppenwolf the first to use heavy metal thunder? Or was Iron Butterfly's first album, Heavy, the first to coin the phrase?
Are Led Zeppelin the all-time kings of heavy metal? Or does the undeniable throne go to Black Sabbath? Some people forget that Helter Skelter was released in 1968. Maybe none of this would have occurred had it not been for Dave Davies of the Kinks, who at a time without distortion took a razor blade to his speaker, creating the first distortion fuzz tones.
Due to the inconsistent support from the mainstream over the years, heavy metal is kept alive by the independent and sometimes underground organizations such as labels, magazines, and websites. In the early years, if you were a heavy metal fan, you had to trade cassettes, 8-tracks, and records bought at a record store. Due to technological advancements, some of these formats have been replaced by the internet. So whether you are in the city or way out in the sticks, if you are truly metal, heavy metal will find you.
Heavy metal guitar is physical, demanding, and requires some technique. Using our Crash Course Metal Guitar method, you will be able to learn how all the featured riffs and examples in this lesson are similar and relevant to each other in their roots. You will also learn the basic heavy metal scales and chords.
The point of these techniques is to help you recognize when they are being used by your favorite artists in their heavy metal anthem. So no matter if you're learning your favorite Black Sabbath or Led Zeppelin album, Crash Course Metal will significantly advance your ability to play this type of heavy metal. Ultimately, Crash Course Metal will give you a clear understanding of the techniques that were used and how they apply to your guitar playing and songwriting abilities today.
"1964 was a very big year for the electric guitar, when Dave Davies of the Kinks took a razor blade to his speakers and achieved fuzz distortion. The sound of rock became heavy. As the 60s progressed, venues grew. Amplifiers had to follow suit. Throughout the 50s and early 60s, the industry standard Fender amplifiers were most prominent. By the mid-60s, however, guitarists were ready for more power, more tone, most importantly, more gain, more distortion. This tone came in the form of a Marshall JTM 45 amplifier, which was basically Jim Marshall's version of a Fender Bassman amp. The Fender Bassman had an open back speaker cabinet loaded with 4 10-inch Jensen speakers. This came in the form of an all-in-one speaker combo format. Marshall's version had a separate amplifier head and speaker cabinet and was originally intended to be a bass amplifier. The Marshall also had a closed-back cabinet loaded with 4 12-inch Celestials.
Some of Marshall's early customers included Pete Townsend and John Entwistle of The Who, who searched for extra volume led Marshall to design the classic 100-watt valve amplifier. After the creation of the full stack, the competition for volume between the two drove Pete to request Jim Marshall to build him an amplifier with even more power. Jim Marshall was working with a team to build the amplifier with double the number of output valves used, along with using a larger transformer. Amplifiers were built and delivered to Pete Townsend. The design was updated to form the now recognized SLP 100 amplifier.
Around 1965, music was in its most experimental times. The harder rock bands were starting to push the boundaries of the hippie flower power movement. Utilizing the styles of the blues and rock, music was being described more so as heavy. Many associate this heavy psychedelic acid rock jam scene that later evolved into prog rock and metal. They had the heavy, but they needed more gain to be heavy metal. The aggressive sound of a fuzz box, such as the one Jimi Hendrix used, called the fuzz bass, provided the extra gain that most guitar players needed to push a hard rock sound. Other popular fuzz boxes of the time included the Electro Harmonix Big Muff Pi and the Vox Tone Bender.
Hard rock and heavy music needed someone to take charge of the style, turn it upside down, and light it on fire. The greatest and most influential guitarist in rock music history would easily be Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was thrust into worldwide fame following his 1967 performance at the Monterey Pop Festival. Borrowing stage antics from The Who, such as trashing their instruments, he stepped up the game several notches by lighting his guitar on fire. Kids, do not, I repeat, do not light your guitar on fire. Later, Hendrix headlined the iconic hippie-infested 1969 Woodstock Festival. Hendrix would also be known for his incredibly loud Marshall and fuzz-faced tone that paved the way for heavy metal. This next riff had all the tension and angst needed to push hard rock into the category of heavy, maybe even metal. The guitar line is playing the B-flat octaves, while the bass line is pumping the low E. These two notes combined created the moment that rock had been waiting for, the heavy metal flat 5. Riff number 2 then incorporates elements of the blues, utilizing the pentatonic scale.
A lot of early hard rock players of the time found themselves writing in the context of the blues, but due to the overdriven amplifier tones, these hard rock bands found themselves pioneering a new sound and style of heavy music. Not too many people associate Eric Clapton with heavy metal, but Cream was most definitely one of the heaviest bands of its time, specifically 1967. Much like Jimi Hendrix, Clapton was using Marshall Fullstats, but instead of a Strat, he found himself using an SG to achieve the heavy sounds of three-piece Cream. The following is a hard rock riff, written in the context of the blues. This style, combined with the newer, more obnoxious fuzz tones of the time, make this riff one of the riffs that started the progression of early metal. The riff is an introduction utilizing the pentatonic and blues scales to create a memorable melody. This next example incorporates chord tones to give the melody a beefier, more metal sound. It also emphasizes the one chord of the 12-bar blues. If you take the riff from the last example and move it down one string to the 5th string root, you will be on the blues 4 chord.
Looking for the perfect blend of entertainment and style? Look no further. Introducing CoastlineMall.com, your one-stop destination for DVDs and fashion apparel. Browse our vast collection, from the latest movie releases to the trendiest fashion must-haves. Shop securely and conveniently at CoastlineMall.com, where you can immerse yourself in the raw energy of music and fashion. CoastlineMall.com, the exclusive home of Crash Course Metal DVDs. Don't miss out on the headbanging action. Visit us today. CoastlineMall.com, unleash your inner rock star. Use the promo code CRASH, and when you buy one item, you'll get a second item at a whopping 50% off. That's right, buy one, get one at half price. But act fast, because this exclusive offer won't last forever. So head on over to CoastlineMall.com now, and let's get that shopping spree started. Remember, it's Crash for your exclusive deal. Don't miss out, CoastlineMall.com, where shopping and savings meet in perfect harmony. Happy shopping, everyone!
Keeping with the blues traditions, this heavy riff now moves to a 5-chord variation and ultimately a turnaround.
With Hendrix and Clapton on the scene, guitar players had quite a lot to live up to. Not to mention, there were hard rock and heavy bands arriving daily. Most heavy bands at the time would borrow a blues riff from the 50s or earlier and bring in some heavier sounds. Take for instance Blue Cheer. They did the Eddie Cochran song, The Summertime Blues, with a very fuzzed out, Cream meets Hendrix sort of tone. More and more bands of the psychedelic acid rock scene were being referred to as heavy. This may have been due to Iron Butterfly's 1966 album called Heavy. Iron Butterfly may have also been the first prog rock band, with 1968's In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, or In the Garden of Eden, as it really should have been titled. Had the members been coherent enough to speak, you could also sense a very defiant, anti-establishment, deafeningly loud, and sometimes political movement starting to surge in the underground. Bands like the Motor City 5, also known as the MC5, and the Stooges undoubtedly helped pave the foundation of punk rock. Metal has a serious side, but most importantly, it has always had a carefree, live-it-up attitude. By the summer of 1968, heavy metal was so close you could feel the heavy metal thunder. That's the term that Steppenwolf lived by in their song Born to Be Wild. And with the phrase heavy metal thunder, the term heavy metal was indeed born to be wild. This next example incorporates a new technique that is used in the context of a chord.
Anytime you pick a note and add another note without picking, you are hammering on a note. The reverse of this technique is called a pull-off. The following example will demonstrate this technique in combination with the blues and all of its elements. A very important technique used by hard rock and metal guitarists is called the palm mute. This is an example of palm muting on just the low E string. The following riff uses the palm mute technique to make this hard rock riff heavier and more metal. Here's another place that you can take the opening riff to make it move and groove. The obvious scale choices for a riff like this would be the pentatonic or blues scale. This next riff also incorporates slides and bends. All notes bent should target a specific note anywhere from a half step to 2 whole steps above it. Always know what note you are bending up to and hit it.
According to Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple, it wasn't until Led Zeppelin came along that hard rock bands had a direction. That direction was more riff-oriented heavy rock. It was not yet totally metal, but heavy. With everyone borrowing something from the blues, mixing it up with rock and roll, you once again needed that fire and energy. By 1969, Led Zeppelin released their first self-titled album. The album kicked off with Good Times, Bad Times, a pretty straightforward blues rock song. The band left their chicks at home, probably to go on tour, during the song Babe, I'm Gonna Leave. By this time, most people listening were dazed and confused. Right about then, communication broke down, and this blues hard rock band found themselves with yet another early form of heavy metal. This next riff is another example of a blues one-chord style riff with a couple of major chord stabs and palm muting for dynamics.
Hard rock artists were always playing around with different rhythm techniques to keep the listener guessing. A good way to keep the 4 and 5 chord changes alive is to incorporate the Chuck Berry sort of hammer-on style. The following groove is a simple 4 and 5 chord riff using the hammer-on to make it even more heavy metal. It was very common for a hard rock guitarist to explore the blues during a solo section. Some players deeply into the blues may even interchange the major and minor pentatonic scales to give it a different vibe for a measure or two.
Is this next riff hard rock or is it metal? The riff has a very strong beat backed up by a huge rhythm section. This type of 16th note beat was very popular at the time. The rapid 16-note palm-muted riff is definitely blues-based. However, the combination of the two, rapid palm muting and blues riffage, gives it a heaviness that makes this riff heavy metal, and most probably influenced early death metal bands to come. Here's another couple of lead licks that were very popular soloing techniques of the time. They were used by anyone from Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, and Pete Townsend. For that matter, anybody who found a guitar in their hands. The rhythm section underneath will give your blues a general key, but you can decide whether or not you want to make it major or minor.
"1970 was undoubtedly the biggest year in metal history to date. This was the year the album Black Sabbath came out. The world would soon know what heavy metal is, and we should all thank Mr. Tony Iommi and Black Sabbath for it. Who would have known that at the time, the introduction of this album would spawn a whole entire subculture of society? Ultimately, all forms of heavy metal will lead you to the path of this album, released in early 1970. First riff was arguably how the world was officially introduced to heavy metal. The riff is nothing more than a blatant demonstration of the flat 5 interval, but with the sounds of metal behind it, you know why it is most definitely heavy metal. You should also notice the rapid hammer-on pull-off sequence known as a trill, that also emphasizes the all-important heavy metal flat 5 note. The creative energy of this band and their exploration of this new heavy sound led them to release another heavy metal classic later that same year. This album was entitled Paranoid. The next heavy metal riff is a classic, and it highlights more hammer-on techniques mixed with a chord context. The riff will also use a blues format for structure, but riffs to come will show you some of the heaviest of early metal. Don't be surprised if you recognize a pentatonic lick or two had it been used and abused by almost every artist of the time. With the introduction of the palm mute technique in the late 60s, early heavy metal artists used this tool as a hammer to emphasize the heaviness of a chord or even as simple as one string. The palm mute is the most interactive technique used by any heavy metal guitarist. In other words, make sure you have your palm muting technique down. This next exercise is a perfect example of how to make a very simple blues riff sound heavy metal by using your palm mute technique. This next pentatonic bass lead exercise utilizes many of the elements we have been emphasizing throughout the Crash Course Metal early heavy metal DVD. This exercise is a perfect example of how hammer-ons can be a very effective and effortless way to approach lead phrasing.
Another innovation Tony Iommi pioneered was the byproduct of an accident. Tony Iommi lost the tips of 2 of his fingers on his fretting hand while working in a metal factory. Initially, he forged himself his own prosthetics. This inadvertently brought detuning to heavy metal. Detuning was not uncommon in the blues, but had not yet been prominently used in heavy metal music. Due to a unique accident, Tony Iommi detuned his guitar, and coincidentally, he wound up influencing a number of highly influential artists and genres of heavy metal to come with his guitar technique. The injured fingers were so tender, so Iommi downtuned his Gibson guitar from E to C sharp around the 3rd album, Masters of Reality. The reduced tension of the strings allowed him to play with less pain to his fingertips. Ultimately, the lower pitch gave the music a heavier, more metal sound, matching the tone of the band's lyrics.
The beauty of the blues and metal is that sometimes the most simple approach is the most memorable and recognizable. Ritchie Blackmore had a very simple way of adding finesse, imagination, and taste. He was able to move freely between the blues, major, minor, and diminished scales. He really had a big impact, especially on the guitar players of the 80s. What was later known as the neoclassical guitarists, people like Yngwie Malmsteen, Randy Rhoads, and Paul Gilbert, all owe a lot of their stylistic approach to Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple. Deep Purple was also one of the first early metal bands that had a keyboard player that was accepted by early heavy metal fans. This was mainly due to the guitar-type sounds that the keyboard was generating. Many guitar players have mistaken the organ for the guitar due to its hyper, raw, distorted guitar sound. 2 generations of kids have driven the guitar store salespeople crazy with this one. That being said, there should be no reason why any Crash Course Metal student should be caught playing this metal riff wrong at any local rock shop.
Well, I'm glad to see that you've made it through Crash Course Metal Volume 1 Early Heavy Metal. At this point, you've learned to play your guitar from the songs and styles that shaped heavy metal. We have done our best to research the elements of heavy metal. Everything we covered, ranging from history, culture, guitar playing techniques, styles, and the gear you need to play early heavy metal. Crash Course Metal's concept of teaching is a first of its kind, because we have covered a lot of the who's, what's, where's, whens, and whys of early heavy metal.
It is your responsibility to go out and discover all the artists of the time and learn from the originators. Don't forget to apply the techniques and knowledge of the gear that we have covered, everything from guitars, amps, scales, chords, modes, palm muting, movable power chords, the blues, hard rock, and solo techniques. Put all these elements together, turn it way up, and you got yourself some heavy metal. By now, you have digested this new format of teaching. Not only have you been shown what to play and how to play it, but hopefully now you know why and where you can utilize any of the concepts in Crash Course Metal Volume 1 Early Heavy Metal.
Keep in mind you're embarking on a lifelong endeavor with heavy metal. The Crash Course Metal series will help walk you through this journey. We would like to give an extra special thanks to the Rainbow Bar and Grill in Hollywood. Next time you're in LA, make sure you stop by. Until then, we'll see you on the Sunset Strip.